you eaten sadza yet?
Welcome to Sadza Space Station here at Sadza Space. My name is Nhamo, I'm your host. And today we welcome our resident artist and neuroscientist, Sade Abiodun?
Yeah, Abiodun.
Abiodun. Okay, all the way from all around the world,
Yes.
right? All right, well, hi.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Really glad to be here.
Great. So why don't we, jump right into it, I guess. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, that answer could go so many ways depending on what you want to know. But I think in the context of today and being here, I'm a storyteller, and I love sort of in the different threads that my work has taken on over time to get to weave stories from a perspective of scientific knowledge and practice, and then also artistic knowledge and practice, and sort of try to find similarities or different, reflections of those worlds within each other, but then also find new ways to communicate between them. So I'm a little bit indecisive. I think we were talking about before this, both being Gemini. So the personality or the sort of persona in whatever language or dialect I'm speaking in really depends on the context and the space. But here today, I'm here as a storyteller.
That's great. That's great. Well, you kind of brought up something in the way that you described yourself there, which leads right into my next question. Explain to us, me as well, right? How, your juxtaposition of neuroscience and your artistic expression.
Yep. Well, it's interesting because juxtaposition is definitely a core word. It comes up a lot in everything that I do. And there was a really long time, I think there was a long time where I was sort of trying to look at different ways to make meaning in the world or of the world. And that started even way before I entered my first neuroscience lab, which was about 10 years ago, which is crazy to think about now. Way before I thought of it through the lens of science and sort of cognitive research. But neuroscience became a really core lens for me basically as soon as I started my undergraduate education at Duke University. And I went into the neuroscience major there, was part of a lot of different programs that both exposed me to sort of the research side of things and what was going on in different neurobiology labs and so on and so forth. But then also just this idea of trying to understand the mind and behavior through the lens of the brain and through the lens of sort of different cognitive processes. And so that was a really intense, or I guess not intense, well, it was intense, but it was a very important lens for me for a really long time. And then around the time that I decided I was graduating from undergrad, I essentially knew that a pivot needed to be made. And I'm a huge fan of pivots. I'm in the midst of a pivot right now. But I knew a pivot needed to be made towards fulfilling or feeding a little bit of my creative and artistic self. And I took a cinematography class my spring semester of my senior year. I was supposed to be taking biochemistry, but I dropped that and went over to cinematography instead. And being introduced to a language around image composition and the moving image became really important to me because, again, I think even my interests in the neuroscience space had a lot to do with visual perception and internal versus external worlds and sort of how we're able to move between those two. And I'd been not only an avid film fan for a really long time, but I essentially grew up inside a movie theater amongst all the sort of different places I was bouncing around, crossing continents. I come from a very not only transient family, but very multicultural family. And so the movie theater and sort of the cinematic narrative was one of the most consistent spaces of expression for me. And so being in the cinematography class, it opened me up to a language of how some of those images were composed, but then also how I myself could use those tools and compose images. And so I really, from that point, started intertwining these two worlds of expression, the neuroscience world and then also the sort of film visual language world. That led into sort of the major focus of my graduate research and what I focus on at Princeton University, where I am currently a PhD candidate, but also very happily have my master's degree from there as well. Well, it kind of came in the midst of the PhDing, but I'm let me just pluck that degree out really quickly.
Grab that.
Yeah, I was like, I'm just gonna grab that and store it in my cubby.
Yeah.
But so yeah, when I got to Princeton, I sort of was. I came into a lab and into a space of wanting to study neurocinematics, so the neuroscience of visual media and film. And again, coming in with now a sort of budding filmic practice. By the time I entered grad school, I'd already sort of made my first film, had that bouncing around a few festival circuits, and had a lot of film community, sort of filmmakers and different audiovisual artists who, again, the language that I was being trained in and sort of introduced to in the scientific and the academic space, I was then also coupling that with sort of an embodied practice and a community of artists that we were talking about a lot of the same things. So in ways, it feels like two sides of the same coin, but then also has opened me up so much more to other spaces of, I guess, both expression that like go beyond just neuroscience as the only hub of theory within the academic space or within the scientific space, or filmmaking as the only sort of mode of practice in the artistic space. So I've really started expanding and blending on those two from there.
Yeah, I picked up on that. Just, from, following you on the social media sites and sort of looking into some of the work that you've done. I got a chance to see your short film, Godspeed.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when you're talking about sort of these, what I might consider two different expressions, but you've found a way to sort of marry them and use them effectively. Another concept came up in Godspeed, which to me, I just coined it as spirituality.
Yeah.
Right. And what does that mean to you? And what does that look like for you? What is spirituality to you?
Gosh.
That was a great short film, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I loved it.
Yeah,
I watched it 3 times.
Oh, wow. I really appreciate that part for multiple reasons. Like, I've watched my own film dozens upon dozens of times, but Godspeed the film also became one of the films that I featured in my research study. So I've also watched people watch Godspeed, while they're in an MRI scanner, like over a dozen times as well. And I love when someone watches it with enthusiasm rather than as part of a scientific experiment.
Sure.
So, but yeah, what a question. So I think answering the question on what spirituality, sort of what the context is or what my context is on it, is also a multi-dimensional, like multi-time and points in time and space question. I think where I'm at now is at a place where I've fallen head over heels from the sort of layer of neuroscience and cinema and the neurocinematics of it into the space of metaphysics. So really loving and playing around with this understanding of time and space and how you can move between not only dimensions of time and space, but thinking of cinema as a dimension of reality, thinking of jazz as a dimension of reality, because jazz is another really important apparatus to me, both as a jazz vocalist myself, but just as a lover of sonic storytelling. And so when I was able to understand not only, I guess, how we process the material or the external world, but also that there are so many other layers of processing and layers of understanding, both just from the world around us, from the media and the sort of stories that we share with one another, it really opened me up to believing in magic again,
Sure.
for lack of a better way to say it. And I think at this current moment, it might change a day from now, it might change like seconds from now, but I think of the metaphysics and the idea of source and spirit and the idea of sort of the multitudes of both universal experience and also just energetic exchange in the world around us, all within the same dance. And I love that as a storyteller and as sort of an observer, an analyst, I get to both see the dance unfold and then also partake in it myself. Yeah.
I love your answers so far because you keep leading me into my next question.
Oh, fantastic!
Each time. So this is like, you're the perfect guest here.
I'm honored.
Yeah. So I think what I was thinking about and what I picked up on there was your jazz sort of reference there, and the fact that you are a vocalist.
Yeah.
What I picked up on before meeting you was that you also play guitar.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
and,
I do.
So I was curious, for starters, how long have you been playing? And
The real question, it's not how long I have been playing, it's how long I haven't, because I sort of hit a gap, or I hit the cap of my guitar skill advancement around like campfire / church band level. And luckily sort of my vocal development carried on past there, and now I know just fantastic guitarists and all sorts of different instrumentalists and different musicians that I'm like, okay, I'll handle the voice part, and y'all have like the absolute universe to sort of play with outside of that. So I haven't played guitar for myself in a really long time, actually.
Okay.
But I got my first guitar. I have 2 guitars, one named Beyonce and one named Solange. And I believe
Nice.
I got Beyonce for either my 16th or my 18th birthday.
Okay.
And I took one, actually, speaking of church band, it was a like church band practice, like sort of learn the most simple chords on the guitar. I had one lesson and then just taught myself the rest from there. But
Oh, that's
I think
awesome.
that's also why my skills hit a cap at a certain point. So
No, that's awesome. I have much the same experience with playing guitar.
yeah,
Just a few lessons, and then sort of took off on my own. But
you still play?
I do still play,
Yeah,
actually.
that's awesome.
I do still play, not in public anymore.
Right,
Obviously,
exactly.
But, things get in the way, it seems.
Our
for
audience
me.
is there.
Yeah.
Our audience is there. I think we just have to own our guitar uniqueness, or I don't know.
Okay.
Skill.
All right. Okay. All right. I'm gonna keep that one in my back pocket.
Yeah.
When I get home, I'll pull out my guitar.
Exactly. No, I'm excited to hear updates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll update you. All right. So we had your voice.
Mm-hmm.
We have the guitar. What else do you consider your instrument?
Oh, okay. You're asking good questions. I started rubbing my hands together just in anticipation. So I was part of, I took a course at Princeton I think either last semester or the semester before last semester, called Radical Composition. And it was led by an amazing theorist and critical writer, Tina Campt. And she made us introduce ourselves not only to each other, like the other members of the class, but also to the guest artists and speakers that would come in every class. And every class, I believe, that I had to introduce myself, I had a different answer. Like, I would say, oh, I'm a filmmaker. Oh, I'm a vocalist. Oh, I just published some poetry, so now I'm a published writer. Oh, I published this paper, so I'm back to being a researcher. And along the way, or close to the end of the semester, I think one of the last classes, I finally just said, like, I've reached the point of reconciliation where instead of me thinking of all the mediums that I move between, I'm finally accepting myself being the medium.
Sure.
And I've just kind of stuck there. So there's a part of my answer, which I love wordplay, so I almost want to answer it cheekily, of like, I am the instrument that I'm always wielding.
Right. And I get that.
Right, you
So,
see it.
yeah,
You see
yeah.
it. But there's also, I think I've thought a lot about what tools and what different sort of extensions of expression that I've moved through. I think one of my favorite lately, which surprises a lot of people, is actually my nail art. And not myself doing my nails. This is always in collaboration with very talented nail techs. But there's a lot of storytelling that goes into even just how I adorn myself and the pieces that I'm moving through, which rings I'm wearing, what my nails look like in a given phase of time. There's a lot of appreciation for physical media that I think I've moved into. So my record collection, for instance, feels like a huge extension, or not just my record collection, but like my playlists and collection of different like soundscapes and sonic meditations. A lot of almost curatorial curiosity has come up for me in saying, what does it mean to tell a story through the different pieces of media that either my favorite artists or some of just my favorite people, friends of mine, have created. And that kind of is a continuous work of conversational art. I've tried to write more. I think I am in a phase where a lot of my expression wants to either come through in like conversation and dialogue with people, or like through a pen on a page. But if it wasn't obvious already, I'm quite a neurodivergent individual, so focusing on a singular like narrative thread for too long tends to bore me. So the different extensions, different spaces, but I'm utilizing myself as the primary instrument.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. So you've been here for how long now?
Gosh, I'd like to say it's been a lifetime, a few lifetimes actually, but I think it's only been 2 or 3 weeks,
Okay.
which isn't kind of crazy.
So how's the residency been for you?
Well, I don't want it to end, if I'm being honest.
Right?
I don't know if I'm giving y'all's keys back. It has been extremely opening, to say the least. And I think in coming into the space and sort of knowing that I was going to be stepping into not only an archival space, but also a cultural space, right?
Right.
There was certain preparation for accessing or thinking about my work through the lens of community, through the lens of sort of time travel and moving between spaces. But so I kind of was preparing myself like, okay, this is what the art and the creativity is going to look like. But it's been in many ways a deep metaphysical, a deep spiritual work. There's been a lot of rooting that's happened here, which is really funny with the sweater that I'm wearing today. And Diani and I have been like talking about this as a running joke, that it's all about the root and like root work. We've done a lot of like heart work here as well.
Right.
And so it's been extremely energetic. And even as I've stepped through the physical space, so like being in Jar House, being in the Sadza space, and just interacting with and really listening to the archive, I think there's been so many conversational threads that I've been able to pick up on. And then in sort of the real world manifestation, there have been just insane portals to, for lack of a better way to describe them, of meeting other artists and storytellers, going into community spaces and seeing other archives and sort of other strongholds of memory and of creativity that are there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been extremely immersive. It's been extremely immersive.
Obviously I like hearing that.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, and we're honored that you took the time to do this, and yeah. So you came, I think, initially with another artist, Montati.
Yes. Shout out to Montati. I hope you're watching this. We miss you. Yeah. It was originally the two of us, and really, what's so interesting or what's so wild about the nodes of connection are that, first of all, I met Montati prior to the residency because they now are attending the school that I went to for my undergrad, and so when I was passing through, we crossed paths. Our point of mutual connection was through Diani. When Diani told me about the opportunity to come here and mentioned that Montati was also considering coming, and they had also known each other beforehand but hadn't seen each other in 10 years. It just felt like a beautiful coalescing of, again, nodes of connection and community across time and space. And so it felt very synchronous, serendipitous, like it aligned really perfectly. Yeah,
no, that's awesome. So I think one of your first experiences here was with Jen Nkuru.
Yes, which is also
Sterling.
Yes.
As well? So you all three were in this space?
Yes, we were.
Okay,
yes,
tell me about that. What does that look like, right? These are all just phenomenal people.
Exactly.
You are.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to journal about that later. So it's really wild because I think that also speaks again to just the serendipitous nature, like the capsule or the portal that's been opened, and that all of these different crossroads have sort of aligned and converged on one another. So yeah, Jen and I have been good friends for a while. We share both creative and artistic universes. We share a lot of just life stories and things like that. And we also share the tendency to never be in the same place at the same time. And so it just by happenstance, she was in town, working on or prepping for projects. I was in town for the residency, and in crossing the paths and really saying, I think you also want to step into this archival space. I think there are conversations that you would pick up on as well, because we're very similar in that way of we buzz when we get near stories and storyteller archives. And it was like lightning, honestly. It felt really great to, again, be revisiting connections and community that's been built over time in the context of not only a cultural space, but really cultural preservation. And so it really, and I met Sterling through Jen as well when he was here, when we were all interacting. And it really reminded me again of how much strength there is within the scene of artists here and within just the community. I also got to meet Onyx Ashanti, another brilliant artist. I got to meet I've gotten to meet so many people that are rooted within the scene. Cornelius and sort of the whole group at Submerge and at Underground Resistance. And so it's felt very special because again, these are all powerhouses in and of themselves, but all those who really value like cultural preservation or sort of rooting in ancestry. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I picked up on. I was unable to come down for most of your time here, but I am aware that you did get to meet quite a number of great Detroit artists, great Detroit people.
Yeah.
So just to be clear for everyone listening, when you speak of the archives, you're speaking of our archive space, right?
Yes.
The ZCCD archives, and that's right here at Sadza Space. But so George Rame was another one of our friends you got to meet. You got to also tour his studio, I think.
Yes, which is a gorgeous. Again, every time I think I've crossed the threshold of a space here, it has been entering a world, and in a lot of ways, and again, it's both been a running joke, but very literal. Like it's sort of been like stepping into Atlantis in a way, like stepping into a world that exists under a very like living or within a very living body of water and body of movement. And so stepping into Georgia's space, stepping into Sadza's space, stepping into Submerge, stepping into even just going outside, like there have been so many portals. And I think what I loved most about the time with George was us talking really about the duality, or more than the duality, the multitudes that exist within art as a medium of sort of commodity and commercial, output, which I think many artists and storytellers in this day and age are faced with that question of, am I making or am I creating in the name of selling, in the name of trying to turn a profit for a living, or is it more about this channeling practice, this connection with source, or this connection with something greater and larger than our material reality? And so in the time with George, and again, in the time that I've been here in general, I've really gotten to dive into that with people and seen and understood from the multiple perspectives of rooting and of legacy and of just, innovation and magic. Again, my favorite word, I'm going to keep talking about magic. How people have made ways and made their paths,
All right, well, to keep in lining with your choice of words there, what did you think of the Magical Motown Museum?
Woo! Yes, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to be a little bit, I'm going to answer this in a multi-dimensional way, if you'll give me the time.
I will.
So I think that there is a really specific way that my time here has made me sit with my relationship to physical space and sort of physical, institution. But then also cultural institution and also legacy and history. In a lot of ways, especially coming from Philadelphia, where I've been based for the last few years, being really immersed in and really just implanted in the Philadelphia arts community, understanding how we talk so much about the spaces of not only our heroes, but I guess just those who have opened the portals before for storytellers and for innovative artists, especially Black artists, especially queer artists. But we see a lot of those institutions sort of fading or decaying or falling. Even in the time that I've been here, one of the oldest arts institutions, I think maybe in America, that was based in Pennsylvania, the University of the Arts, just abruptly closed. And that's affected not only so many of my friends and sort of community directly, but just the Philadelphia art scene as a whole. And coming here and realizing that there are ways for Black narratives of storytelling, of community, and of power to actually be sustained despite or sort of both despite or in contention with whatever the dominant narrative is of where power comes from or what is worth supporting or financing, on a government level. It gives me a lot of newfound hope that I almost feel sparked to say, what does it look like to not only honor the legacies of what has who have come before us and what has passed. Where I was living in Philadelphia was 2 blocks or more than 2 blocks down the road from John Coltrane's old house. Right?
Oh, nice. Wow.
And they only recently decided that they might do a restoration project on that.
Preserve that.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I'm okay, it's possible to
just
preserve.
now.
Just
wow.
now, right? Yeah. and there's such a sense of when you step into a space like that, and again, magic. We're talking about the metaphysical. You feel the energy that's passed through there over time. You're very aware of just what it meant to be given creative freedom. And one of the things that really stuck out to me about that space was and that they pointed out during the tour was it was open 24 hours. It was about recreation.
Wow.
It was about just like really emphasizing the play and emphasizing collaborative, just fun, and then the beauty of sort of whatever art came from the process.
Sure.
And that's process work and process art is a huge sort of grounding concept to me. It's the entire sort of infrastructure of my ampersand universe. And so seeing that in that space, I think mattered a lot to me. And I hope to see that in other sort of strongholds of Black creativity.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of Detroit outside of sort of, these areas that are, points of interest you've seen, but what are your general thoughts on our city?
It's very special.
It is, right?
Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah.
It's very magical. And I think so I do have family here. My cousins grew up here, their aunt still lives here, and I've been needing to text her to tell her I'm in town, which is the like sort of guilty throbbing at the back of my head. But I've just been so busy with residency.
Right.
But so there is a sense of like a rootedness or familiarity that I felt coming in just because of knowing that there were, that my ancestry or people within my lineage also rooted here.
Okay.
But then there was also so much of a sense of, just how much it reminds me of places that I hold really near and dear to my heart. It reminds me of Philly, it reminds me of other places, but also has a deep, unique, I won't even call it a signature because it's just, there's such a multimodality to it. And in a lot of ways I feel it was very fated for me to come here. And a recent film that I made, an audiovisual capsule called Tectonic, was sort of a piece that I made in conversation with Jen's work and with other artists who had highlighted the legacy of techno, especially like where that branched off, or not just branched off, but where that was seeded and originated in Detroit. And so there's a real sense of being summoned by the heart, or being summoned by sort of the core of that pulsing and that sort of rhythmic storytelling apparatus that made it and does make it make a lot of sense why I came here. And I've been in such a jazz world in Philly that I was like, okay, it's techno time. Like it's time to actually get into the electronic. It's time to get into the pulse and the beat. And so I've been really honored to get to do that here.
Were you here during the techno?
Yes, I was.
Oh, wow.
Did I go outside that often? No, but I did go to at least 2 shows.
Nice.
I went to at least 2 shows. Friends of mine were playing, which was really awesome. And just like, also like getting to meet other friends and other people who were in town for such a moment of movement was really exciting.
Yeah, that is a great. I don't even know what to call it. A festival.
Exactly.
An
energetic
movement. Yeah. It's great. So I think what I wanted to ask you and what I wanted to make sure I asked you was. Obviously, we've been honored to have you here as a resident. Yeah. I wanted to know if there was anything else that you wanted to talk about, maybe in terms of maybe a new project you're working on, or something we can look forward to seeing coming out, a new film.
Yeah. You're asking very good questions. You should consider interviewing people more often.
Professionally?
Yeah, I know. I was like, I failed at the joke, but
it's true.
Yes, it is true.
Yeah.
So much there. So the thing about portals opening is you really never know when they're going to open and close. Like the fact that particular tear was made in the space-time continuum just means that you have surrendered yourself to the flow. And so much has flowed out during my time here. I think one of the things that really caught me by surprise in the focus of the work while I've been here has been in developing something within the realms of like an integrative energetic matrix of symbols or sigils. And that's come both from conversations with Diani, the curator, it's come from conversations with Montati, the other artist, but then also just meditating a lot on, again, this balance between our physical representations of energy, whether they materialize in like different forms of art or language or systems of language. So like really thinking of sigils, going back to, I think an alphabet that matters a lot to me. So like the Yoruba alphabet or thinking of like symbolism there, thinking a lot about symbols in music, and so musical annotation or musical notations. There's something within that space that's, calling me to explore a little bit more about how we generate representations, and how we're also, if anything, doing a very important work in the decolonization effort, and sort of moving away from Westernness or Western whiteness as the core frame for our understandings of communication and knowledge, through returning to symbols, and through returning to sort of different ways that we tell stories through the way that things are shaped. And so that's come up a lot. It's also been really wonderful to get in the studio while being here. I have a little bit of a studio version because, again, I never know what personality is going to come through when a microphone is put in front of my face. But we've spent a lot of time in the studio just doing not only sort of vocalization and percussion, like rhythmic grounding and ritual, but also really diving into what it means. The theme of sirens has come up a lot. So like sort of sonic luring and creating soundscapes and sound spaces as a modality of healing. I think a lot about my voice as a vocal technology, and with the training that I have within the sciences, and with the sort of frame that I have within storytelling, especially through film, then utilizing the voice in ways that does this channeling or does this sort of energy activation. It's something that I've been really excited to explore here, and also thinking about that in the context of tradition, and thinking it in the context of who the griot is, or what the griot is, what the healer is, what the community sort of spiritual steward is. So I have no idea exactly what will be sort of the final remnants of this portal. I think there's going to be a lot for a long time to come, but
Yeah.
I'm really grateful to what it's opened me up to.
Yeah, I think we'll keep our senses open, right?
Always.
to what you have to share with us in the future. So that's fantastic. I want to thank you for taking this time to at least give our audience and people that weren't able to meet you here a little bit of yourself through this interview. So we've had Sade here with us this evening. I want to thank you everyone for listening. This has been Sadza Space News on Sadza Space Station, and you can join us and find us on all the links below. Thank you. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button.
You should definitely subscribe.
Thank you.
Have you eaten sadza yet?